Hey, everybody, it's Johnny C. Cochran, candidate for U.S. Congress, Alabama's 4th District. It's Saturday, July 23rd. The little ones are down for sleep, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. One of my commitments in this race is to be the most accessible candidate in the race. And I mean that, so I want folks who have questions to send them my way. Best way to do that is through my email, Johnny C. Cochran 4al@gmail.com. Some of that information will be scrolling across the bottom. But I have planned to have some conversations with some folks. I feel like long form conversation is something I particularly enjoy when I'm trying to learn. And I'm going to arrange some conversations with some different folks. But I had also planned at some point to maybe try to have like a virtual town hall or a couple of those. And tonight we're going to bring on a guest, and his name is Trey. He is a potential voter in Alabama's 4th District. So we're going to bring him on and just have a conversation. So let me figure things out. We're going to do a little switcheroo here. All right. Trey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Trey, really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you tonight.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, I think how this came about is you live in District 4. One way or the other, you became aware of my campaign. And it was important that, as you evaluate what your options are for this November, that you talk about some issues and maybe figure out where I stand on certain things. And so just want this to be kind of a free-flowing conversation. Ask me as many questions as you'd like this evening. If it runs long and one of us needs to tend to the family, certainly we can reschedule and have a part 2. But certainly would love for you maybe just to start off, for anyone who's watching tonight, just to give a general introduction of yourself, and certainly any details about you that might help me understand a little bit maybe about what your perspective might be.
Yeah, so I'm Trey. I was born in Gadsden, lived in sort of the Atala, Boaz area for most of my childhood, and then moved with my wife to Fort Payne, and then I've moved over here in the Gadsden area. So that's where we've been living for the past 5 years.
Great. Yeah.
And a little bit. I guess I can give a little bit more. I graduated from JSU with a bachelor's degree in computer science, and I work as a software developer for a remote company.
Great. Yeah, Gadsden, it's interesting how the shape of District 4 is, right? So I'm in Tuscaloosa, and it goes all the way up to the Shoals, and then it kind of juts out, and you're on the other side of the state in the Gadsden and Fort Payne area. I plan on going out that way August 6th, Saturday. We're going to try to do some campaigning. I'm talking to a couple of local coffee shops, just trying to see, not trying to, earn their endorsement, but just ask, would I have your blessing to publicly advertise that I'm going to be at your establishment on this date from this time to this time, not talking to customers, just being there. And if customers want to talk to me, that'd be great. And then, was going to do some walking at the world's longest yard sale.
That seems to be a popular thing. Yeah. My parents go. They always have to make a point of it every single year to go do the world's longest yard sale. They try to go as up toward almost like in Tennessee to all the way.
I have never been, and so one of the things I'm trying to do with my campaign is to have some fun with it, and I'm trying to attend, whatever events that my schedule will allow. And so certainly that one caught my eye. And so I'll be going up that way to check it out.
Yeah, it's definitely an experience because you see them for all as far as the eye can see, yard sales all the way down. So
Yeah.
that's something different.
So I understand you have some questions for me, and along the way, I hope you don't mind if I ask some for you. And so maybe an easy one to start with that I would ask you, and maybe that leads into whatever series of questions you had for me would be is how do you as a citizen decide who to vote for? What is there a process? And I guess what I mean by that is, some people vote straight party ticket. Some people really try to do a little bit of surface level digging about, where do people stand on the issues. I mean, I guess obviously you're at least that, right? Because you reached out and said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about, a couple of issues. So could you just maybe help me understand how do you arrive to the conclusion of who eventually you'll end up voting for?
Yeah, so there's obviously I look at the issues primarily, and decide what are the sort of policy decisions that the candidate would want to undertake, and what sort of solutions that they're going to prescribe. Because I don't want to elect someone obviously that is going to try to undermine what I have established for me and my family, and I want it to be something that we can have a really great future going forward. So that's the first and foremost is how is this going to impact me and my family directly, and then obviously I do make some sort of concessions at some point because you're never going to find the perfect candidate. So there is some concessions to be made, and I do look at it through a pragmatist sort of lens at the end of the day and say, well, is which one is going to be more in line with what I have to do, what my personal beliefs about what policies should be prescribed in that way, and try to see where I can find the most alignment in those sort of beliefs.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So why don't we just jump right into, what are some of those things that, are most important to you and your family?
Yeah, so obviously, we need to have people working. So obviously, I like to be gainfully employed. So if I have access to opportunities to get jobs, luckily I'm gainfully employed right now. But if with the way the economy is now, you see, I definitely would like more opportunities to so that way in the event that if something happens, companies have to let people go. There are more options, there are more opportunities for everybody to be able to get a piece of that pie, and be able to make their own way. And then there are some other sort of minor things. I do appreciate having a solid border to be able to protect our country, and be able to defend from people who are coming across maliciously. And I definitely think that that's an important thing. And the sort of the social aspect as well. I don't want these sort of, especially you've seen the sort of negative social aspects lately creeping up, and as well as being pro-life. I'm unabashedly pro-life, so I do value human life, and I do. Those are some of the things that I really harp on primarily.
Sure. So in that, I heard, the economy, immigration, social issues, and a cultural life. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, so I guess we can start with the economy, and there's I wasn't able to actively be involved. That's the detriment of being a gainfully employed citizen. You can't really do political activism that much, but I did join the group, and I did send letters to my representatives to talk about there was a rendering plant trying to be put here by Gadsden in the county, and there was I joined the group where they were talking about how to basically stop it, because they were going to put it near our airports and near our rivers, and it was going to be a bad it wasn't going to be a good fit. And what I was going to ask you is, we had these communities of Gadsden and Etowah County to come together to stop Pilgrim's Pride from putting a rendering plant here that could have damaged our local ecosystem and our airport authority. And what do you think could be bring real economic opportunities to here to the Gadsden and Etowah County area instead of just more like factory work, because that seems to be that they all that they want to prescribe.
Yeah, I think I'd probably answer that in a couple of different ways. So in the role I'm running in to be the congressperson for District 4, certainly more of what I would be able to do or influence would be at the federal level. Having said that, I mean, I think the question you just asked, there's a lot of folks all over the country who want to know, how can we make sure that the economic engine of our local community is thriving? What I have proposed is that we need to have economic policies that do a couple of different things. And the first, as in my role as your congressperson, would be there is some, I don't know what the right word for it is. There is some cronyism between the super mega corporations and the government. And what I mean by that is, the super
Yeah,
mega
that's kind of the Ron Paul, kind of what he talked about cronyism, and he actually even has an entire book on it.
Yeah, I just feel like small business is the backbone of America. And, you know, um, the trickiest part about being an entrepreneur, right? And maybe you're a solo entrepreneur and you're trying to get something off the ground is there seems to be a lot of laws and regulations and red tape that are on the books that you know they don't necessarily help the mega corporations, but the mega corporations have the manpower and the financial ability to handle it. And so oftentimes you'll see that these mega corporations will push for some sort of reform or law to be passed. And on the surface, maybe it sounds good, but it's really putting our small businesses at a disadvantage.
Like raising minimum wage, I guess, is a good one. If you have a minimum wage and you raise that, obviously that's going to benefit the big corporations that can take that hit. And if you have a mom and pop shop, they can't pay $15 an hour to Susie, who works as a desktop clerk. Like they
Yeah.
can't handle that.
So, at the federal level, I guess some of my prescriptions would be is one is I'm not saying we have to necessarily, eliminate a lot of these laws, but I think like if we're going to have these laws, there need to be exemptions for small business. Because if a small business grows from 1 to 10 to 50 to 200 employees, that takes time. It takes a lot of hard work, and I feel like the entrepreneurs' value that they bring to their community is almost anything but jumping through all the hoops that they have to do in order to make sure that they don't run afoul of the law. So at the federal level, there's things like that. I also think, and this is something, and maybe you can speak to this, because I wasn't expecting this, is that a lot of people I've never met, and I should have said this at the beginning, you and I have never met. This is the first time we've interacted, not through, email or something like that. A lot of people from the Fort Payne and Gaston area let me know that the incumbent was one of the pivotal votes in passing CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement. And I had at least 4 or 5 people all reach out to me with, the same story with different words saying, I used to work for so and so manufacturing, CAFTA passed, and the jobs left. And I don't want to lie to people. I don't know if I can bring those same jobs back. But what I would say is, um, you know, free trade doesn't require several hundred pages of legalese to go through. If it was free trade, which is something I in general believe in, it would say United States is going to have a 0% tariff on products that come from these 1, 2, 10 nations, and they're going to reciprocate. But that's not what we have. So things like NAFTA and CAFTA, when they pass these things, um, I think a lot of people looked at it and said, free trade's in the name of the bill. So that's a good thing. The fact of the matter is a lot of our manufacturing left after those things. And I know that people, you know, are hurting from that still. And some communities that were supported by maybe one large manufacturer and that manufacturer left, decimated the community. And so, certainly again at the federal level, I would try to do one of a couple things. One is look at things that are already on the books and try to advance the dialogue that either it was the wrong move and we need to repeal it, or are there things that we can do to help small businesses not just survive but thrive? Um, you know, I think the core part of your question is, what type of industries could we see? I think there's a whole lot of interesting things, and again, I think there's only so much I could do at the federal level. I know there's libertarians. There's over 60 on the ballot across the state of Alabama, running it both for the federal, local, and state level. And so, maybe they would.
Unfortunately, not. I think that there's not one in my state senate or state house
Okay.
district, so
Okay.
that's unfortunate. I really would have liked to see somebody actually challenge, because our state senator, although he was good on the, like I said, the rendering plant thing, he was bad on he helped pass the gas tax. So, and I really
Mm.
wish that the gas tax would get repealed. So
Yeah. Before I expound more on the economy, one of the things I'll tell you that's very exciting that I think a lot of libertarians are behind is something that's called INR, so initiative and referendum. Alabama is one of the only states in the union that doesn't have at least one or the other or both. And basically what that means is um, there's a lot of Alabamians that are not happy about that gas tax. And so, if your local state legislature refused to do anything about it, a citizen or a group of concerned citizens could collect signatures and kind of go around the state legislature to put it on the ballot. So, if you can imagine, KIV signs the gas tax. People like you and me are not happy about that. We go out, we collect signatures, it gets on the ballot, and then Alabama voters could vote, yes, we're going to keep the gas tax, or no, we're going to get rid of it. Um, so INR is something that I know that a lot of our state and local reps are trying to um, bring light to, because it's not an issue that a lot of people know about. But the idea is you know as I would say with DC about our DC representatives being disconnected from us, I feel the same about Montgomery. you know and I think that citizens should have the opportunity to vote on things they want to vote on, and if their legislature refuses to bring up a certain thing for a vote, this would be a tool or mechanism that would allow them to do that. One of the things about Alabama is they have seemed taken great strides in terms of auto manufacturing. So I know
yeah,
that
like the Honda plant, that's one of the most popular places around here that a lot of people get employed through the Honda plant.
yeah, Honda. I think there's a BMW plant by me in Tuscaloosa. I think there's a Hyundai plant down closer to Montgomery that I've been to before. So that's great. But having said that, um, you know, I think it's not wise for any state to put all your eggs in one basket, right? So what if you know an auto manufacturer that doesn't have their cars made in our state really takes off and that they become the market leader, and then we're looking again at layoffs or reduced hours or what have you. So, one of the things I've been trying to touch on is, I want to make America into a maker space. And what I mean by that is I want things made in America again. And, I'm realistic. I'm not saying I want to make Happy Meal toys in America. But,
But
life-saving
all of
medicine.
all of our major things that we use should be in America. Like like our some of our appliances here are actually made in America, and more of that should be happening. We shouldn't be relying on
I
just China, because I mean, especially if you look at China and how their economy is sort of dwindling, as a lot of the issues have plagued them recently.
Yeah, I feel like, and the term I've heard others use is that we should have a strategic decoupling from China. And, nothing against the people of China. I would say my comments really are meant towards the
Government, the
CCP, right?
CCP, yeah.
I view China as the number one competitor to America on the world stage. And if anything, from this pandemic, we learned how much of our medicine, how much of our PPE, all that stuff, was we relied on uh, getting it from China. And then the cost of shipping everything, I don't know what the real number is, but I mean, I think it doubled or tripled. I would remember hearing news stories about how a container used to cost X and now it was significantly more than that. And so, I definitely think at the federal level, we can create policies and set the tone that advanced medicines, satellites, rocketry, large machinery, I think a lot of those things could be made in America. The reason why a lot of that gets, offshored is because of the basically the tax code we have in place. And so that's where I think I would focus a lot of my energy and efforts is to try to make that happen. To answer specifically about like what other industries I think could be really exciting, um, beyond just, producing, you know, large complex things. Um, I have been doing a lot of research into what is referred to as Generation 3 and Generation 4 nuclear power. When most people think of nuclear power, they think of like Chernobyl or Three Mile Island or Fukushima. These are like the old school power plants. And these Generation 3 and these, in theory, Generation 4 that they think they've cracked the code on, you know, they're like
Much
super,
less waste,
yeah, well,
much more efficient, much more power generation from a lot of these. And
safer. And instead of having to like hide the nuclear spent rods in like that Yucca Mountain project, it actually can use the waste as fuel, as a fuel source. So it's, if you're concerned about the environment, which a lot of people are, if you're concerned about carbon going into the atmosphere, I mean, nuclear power is
the way to go.
the
Yeah.
greenest of green energies. And so I feel like we could have almost a golden age if we could somehow um, reduce some of the red tape. And I know there's a lot of startups in this space that part of the problem with the bureaucracy is you have to jump through all these hoops through the government to be able to approve everything. And they have to do that every single time for every single plant. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to build like like a plant that could just be replicated in different parts of the country so that they only have to jump through the red tape once. And once they get that stamp of approval, that means that they can build that exact same plant at other places. So, nuclear,
Like a modular, I guess a modular format of just like this is the layout of the plant that we want to build, and we can basically reproduce this anywhere.
yeah. And, I think the benefits to that are one, it's kind of an untapped industry because there's going to be a lot of jobs associated with building the plants. There's going to be a lot of jobs associated with running the plants. If we're able to build those plants at scale, and to my understanding, I've read that China is trying to build these at a clip, is if we can reduce the cost of power, how much does that help regular folks like you and I on our power bills? And then for companies, power is a significant cost in running their business. If you're Honda, power is an input of what it takes to build those things. So if they're able to reduce the overall cost of power, certainly that could lead to the company making more money. Maybe they pay their people better. Maybe that allows them to reduce the cost of purchasing the vehicle because they're able to maintain that margin a little bit. So I think there's a lot of things exciting about trying to unlock that as an industry. I'd also say there's a lot of the industries that the government is most heavily involved
Would
in.
you would you support trying to like give them tax breaks to be able to try to get more of these plants made or something like that, or are you completely against like sort of incentivizing them in that way?
Yeah, what I would say is I am not in favor of providing corporate subsidies to companies. I don't believe that we should be doing that. I do believe that the government could make it easier for these people, and there are super rich people who put a lot of money into these kind of nuclear power startups. And, I don't necessarily think that um, funding is the issue. I think the issue is just there's so many boxes to check in order to jump through all the hoops that they have to. And, you know, I'm sure that's not just through the Department of Energy, but they're probably having to deal with, the Department of, you know, Interiors, or, the land management folks. And so I feel like there's a lot of different entities they have to work through.
Yeah.
Um,
So would you support trying to like completely deregulate some of those aspects of getting that approval?
yeah, I think so. And I guess what I would say is, you know, I can be persuaded. Um, you know, I think most of the people that are Congress people, for the most part, um, they're not necessarily, most of them are lawyers. Most of the time, the lobbyists are the ones that write the bills and hand them in. And, most of the time, the Congress people don't even read the bills, right? They're just told by their leadership whether to vote one way or the other. You
Yeah, like
know,
Nancy Pelosi, we got to pass it to see what's in it.
yeah. So, what I would say is, like, I'm not an energy expert. I just am
Mhm.
fascinated by it. I've read about it a lot. I've tried to listen to some podcasts by people who are, are super knowledgeable. And I guess what I would say is, if I was put in this position, I do know, some definitely, what I would consider experts to reach out to. And, I don't think we should deify our political leaders. We're just people, and I don't think you should think that any political person has all the answers. I think the best, representatives understand how to survey the landscape, how to look at all the variables, and then try to make the best decision. And for me, that's going to be having these experts. Um, you know,
Outsourcing some knowledge.
testify in front of Congress and have them be a part of that process. Um, definitely. Just really quickly, the some of the other things I think that could um, really be some interesting ways to kind of grow our economy, other than the makerspace idea, other than nuclear power plants. There is a kind of infant industry related to Bitcoin. There's a lot of Bitcoin startups. That's a project that I'm following very closely. I do think that there is an opportunity for, potentially some um, industry to rise up around that, as well as the two things that have the most government interference would be education and healthcare. I think we're kind of stuck in this legacy system where we just kind of think, well, it's been this way forever, so that's the way it has to be. And maybe we'll talk about education or healthcare later in another conversation, but I do think they're both stagnant, and I think there's some innovation that could lead to some jobs and stuff like that.
So, would you another question had here talking about crypto, because I am invested in crypto, and I do believe in that's the ideology of crypto being able to decouple money, particularly Bitcoin, and there's a couple of other ones. I've participated in one community, Hive, which is it also has a lot of capabilities with social and other capabilities for it to be fast, feeless transactions. There's
Hmm.
a lot of capability with crypto. So would you support trying to give it legitimize it through uh, regulating it as a commodity? I don't like regulation, but to garner wider adoption, there a lot of people are wanting it to be regulated, and the best way for it to be regulated is likely through being a commodity, because if it's an asset class, obviously you see we get taxed on it if we sell it at this point. So
Yeah,
what is your take on legitimizing it through commodity regulation?
I do know there are some people like the senator from Wyoming is one of the Senator Loomis, who is kind of a leader in this area, trying to get some sort of a clarification. I would agree with you that at a high level, a lot of regulation often doesn't make sense. However, you have a lot of players in the market who are paralyzed by the fact that there aren't any clear rules or boundaries. I do feel like some of those alphabet organizations like the SEC and people like that, um, I feel like they're dragging their feet, but I guess
Yeah,
that is.
and the I think the fear for people is actually, if you look at some of the exchanges that have went under recently, they were all tied to one particular funding apparatus. They were all tied to one capital management corporation. And this when Three Arrows Capital went under, essentially all of the funding for majority of the crypto exchanges were wiped out. So I think that's the fear for the general population of like, well, if I put put my money into this funny money, is it really just going to be gone after I do that? So I think that
Yeah.
do you think that giving it that legitimacy, even though obviously we don't, you and I assume both don't want regulation of any sort, because it never seems to matter or have any real purpose other than to hinder the
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah. It always seems like the regulation, even if it sounds well intended at first, it always goes overboard. But if I was in Washington D.C., certainly I would be an advocate for Bitcoin. I'm not as familiar with a lot of other crypto projects. Um, I am fairly familiar with Bitcoin, and I think it's not only the right thing to do to provide clarity to not just American citizens and American companies, but if you go down the rabbit hole pretty far regarding Bitcoin, certainly it is something that could be considered a national security concern, meaning the idea is that if the Bitcoin project succeeds in becoming, money separated from the state, if other countries around the world at some point decide they don't like the fate of their countries being tied to whatever the politicians in DC and the Federal Reserve decide, if more and more countries were to go to, Bitcoin or a Bitcoin standard, certainly at some point there is a almost a
Well,
national security risk for the
well,
U.S.
it
dollar.
would be like you could have a global reserve currency being, instead of the U.S. dollar, it would be Bitcoin, and that, I think that's the worry and the concern for them, obviously, as protecting the state in that way. So
Yeah. So definitely, that would be my secondary concern about Bitcoin going to DC is, does the US government have plans in place? Because much of the success of the country has been the strength of the US dollar and the fact that it is kind of the de facto reserve currency of the world. And so,
yeah,
I think,
between being global reserve currency status, as well as be establishing the petrodollar, which is, if you saw since the war in Ukraine, that kind of has fallen off, because some of them are paying in rubles now because they have to get their oil from Russia. So
yeah, yeah. So big believer in Bitcoin. Would love to provide clarity for American citizens and American companies, and at the same time, make sure that the United States federal government is strategically planning and gaming out different scenarios, which include Bitcoin becoming a much larger market cap than it is.
definitely. Um, So, as I know that you're running as a libertarian candidate, and I would consider myself sort of like the paleo libertarians, of that ilk. But as a libertarian, generally speaking, we like having no taxes, right? We prefer to have no taxes. But do you think that you would come together with your Republican and Democrat colleagues to try to implement something and change your tax structure to be something like the fair tax? I really think that this is a good model that would incentivize or disincentivize consumption as the primary model for the structure of the economy, and that would be the fair tax would basically, you're only taxed as much as you're actually consuming. So I don't know if you were able to read up any on that, and
Yeah,
what your thoughts on that are.
yeah. I mean, I'm aware of what it is. I did not, brush up on it to be able to have a deep dive discussion on it tonight. But the way I would answer your question is, I will work with anyone in Washington D.C. to make the tax burden on Americans less, big or small. So certainly would take a look at what you just mentioned. I'd also say, one of my uh, specific proposals, which is very popular when I talk to the people who would be affected by it, is, I believe in the 80s, the IRS changed the tax code to say that tips and gratuities had to be reported and included on income tax. So, I took my boys out to dinner tonight, and I have a little card here, little campaign card that has a QR code for our website, and basically says, "I believe gratuities and tips should be exempt from the income tax." So, no one's getting rich off tips, right? If you're a barber, an Uber driver, a food delivery person, a hairstylist, a massage therapist, a content creator on a streaming platform, you earn tips. And I don't understand how in the current tax system, if I went to the Waffle House, I could give the waitress $10,000 and she would not have to claim that on her taxes because it was a gift. But if I received excellent service and a lot of young people don't carry cash and I pay with my credit card and I say I'm going to leave a 20 or 25% tip, that tip is subject to the income tax. And so,
Yeah, I
that,
worked as a waiter for a while, and so I knew that whenever people would swipe their card, and obviously that gets automatically reported through the systems, and I would get taxed on that. But if they left me cash, then that was honestly better because then I didn't have to necessarily claim all of that on my taxes. So
yeah. So, I would try to go for things big and small. Um, Americans are taxed too much, taxed on income, taxed on what we buy, taxed on our property. When, our investments do well, we're taxed on that.
yeah,
And
and they were recently trying to propose unrealized capital gains tax to also be added, which I thought was an absolutely terrible idea
yeah,
because you see how those assets fluctuate over time, and you'd be taxed on something that you didn't even necessarily it didn't have the same value the next day. So
yeah, which is insane. Now, I will say this, um, I would be in favor again of things big and small. So another small idea would be is, I know there's people who have fun, who are active traders. I'm more of a buy and hold person myself. And so, I think there's something already on the books that says, if you hold an investment, I think it's for 1 year, you're,
long term capital,
you're
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They basically have the short term capital gains. Is if you trade it within less than a year, then you'll be taxed at like I think it's like 30%, and then if it's long term, it'll be 10%. So
yeah.
I don't
I
know.
would, I would be in favor of again, trying to reduce the tax burden on folks who aren't day trading. If you buy something and hold it for a year, should you not be rewarded more if you hold it for 5 years or 10 years? And so, anything big or small, even in trying to, one of the things I brought up the other night was I specifically remember Speaker Paul Ryan saying that now that we have control of Congress, we're going to make taxes so simplified, you're going to be able to fill it out on a postcard. Now, that never
Yeah.
happened because taxes are still incredibly painful to do yourself, in my opinion. Anything I could do to lower the tax burden, working with any person, regardless of political party, is certainly something that I would be in favor for.
So do you think I don't know how much support this would garner, but do you think you would try to possibly, if there was an opportunity to get rid of long term capital gains tax, to get rid of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to see what the appetite is. I
Yeah.
think the tricky part is you never hear those ideas even mentioned, right? But you do hear crazy ideas on the other end. So at some point, you
We're
heard
gonna add
people,
more subsidies, more taxes, just
well,
out of nowhere.
at
Yeah.
some point, and you've probably heard this too. I've heard people say, they're going to try to go into your 401k. They're going to say, hey,
Mhm.
sorry that we were so fiscally irresponsible for all these decades, but we're in such a hole. We now actually need to take some out of your 401k or your Roth IRA or whatever it is. And so to me, whenever you hear those crazy, when I say crazy, I guess I mean, whenever you hear those ideas that are further out of the mainstream, they're always from the let's tax people more side. They're never from the, you know, let's tax people less side. So again, big or small ideas, anything that would help the average working American, I'm definitely in favor for.
Awesome. So, um, So, do you know about the right to repair movement? I follow Louis Rossman. I don't know if you've ever watched his YouTube videos, but he is an advocate for right to repair, and essentially your items that you buy nowadays. If you see, we're becoming a much of a more like rent model with all of our devices. We don't, you don't get to own it. You don't get to fiddle with it. You can't really get the parts that you need, and you can't get manuals and schematics for these devices. So, would you be supportive of trying to allow Americans have access to do with their own devices as they want to?
Yeah. So before you had sent me that message with some of the things you want to talk about, I'll be honest, I had not heard of the right to repair movement. Now I did look it up some, so I don't know if I would feel comfortable giving you like a super hard, firm answer, but in general, from what I've read and how you laid it out, um, seem to be supportive of that. I mean, I believe that one of the critical things about our society now is, I
Well,
don't.
I can give you the short rundown. Essentially, Louis Rossman, who's the main advocate for it, he talks about it all the time. That he is a MacBook repair guy in New York, and when he's working on these MacBooks and he's trying to repair them, he doesn't get schematics. He can't get schematics from Apple to be able to see how he's going to actually repair the boards and be able to fix these computers. And a lot of these computers, they may just need a new, something new, little piece, a tiny piece soldered back onto the board, and then it works like brand new. So this also can kind of go into the sort of the eco waste as well, because we become a throwaway society. I don't know if you've noticed.
Yeah,
People get a new phone every 3 years and then they just throw the old one away, don't care about it, don't recycle it. I mean, there's so much more longevity that we could have to our devices if you can have the parts and the schematics available to be able to actually go in there and repair it. And I think that this is one of the things that I think could become more of an industry, kind of like bringing more jobs here. I think that having repair, because there's a lot of devices nowadays to repair, right? So I'm thinking if you could have the ability to repair, there's a lot of different myriad of devices that people could repair if given access to some schematics and parts from Apple or Samsung or whatever it may be. Even tractors, they're trying to limit how people can repair them to only
yeah,
being. My dad works as a John Deere mechanic, so um, working on the John Deeres, he is one of the few people authorized to actually make that repair, and they're
yeah,
becoming increasingly locked down on that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. I think from what I seem, I would be supportive, and I actually made a note on my notes to tell you that, when I went to the website, or when I Googled to find out what it was, it had a map of America, and it looked like it was tracking, what states had active bills or historically had introduced bills in the past. And so this was a topic that I wanted to commit to you, that in addition to just kind of looking at it more for myself and trying to understand if there's a role at the federal level, that I am going to pass it along to my colleagues in the Libertarian Party of Alabama, because at least according to the main website that I looked at, it looked like Alabama in the past had introduced some sort of bill, but there was not an active one. And so I did write that down to be able to tell them that I had a potential voter who brought this issue to our attention, and maybe it's one that we as a party want to look into more.
yeah, and Louis Rossman is a sort of a more libertarian figure. He's talked to libertarians, people in the space, and he actually, one of his biggest funders is a libertarian who's do you should also look up this organization, FUTL. He's doing some stuff sort of. You were talking about maker spaces. He's actually giving grants to certain people to do make being able to build these sort of their own makerspace, given these grants from himself, because he's a billionaire. He's just kind of giving some of these grants out to people to try to make their own makerspaces for certain projects.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to get out of my lips earlier was I feel like part of our um, education system that's really lacking is like a skills based education, right? And so um, I'm a child of the '80s, so they didn't have shop by the time I was in high school. But like back in the day, they had shop. You got to work with your hands, and they might ask you to, build a chair or something like that. And so certainly, I think it's really important as we're trying to prepare our students um, for either college or for the real world. I don't know if, getting them to memorize a bunch of stuff to regurgitate on a test is truly benefiting them. I think we should be talking to them about developing skills and, trying to pair their interests with what those skills are. And so, if there are kids who are inclined to work with their hands, we need to get them in we need to get them in a makerspace. They need to be making robots. They need to be tinkering with things, learning from somebody how to do it properly, and see if they have an aptitude for it.
Yeah, and I guess this can segue nice to the education sort of portion of what I was talking about. So I for one, definitely would think that an apprenticeship model would be a very good model for school systems. But generally speaking, we have our standard um, teacher in front of the classroom kind of education, and that is beneficial for some students. So I know you said you're open to school choice, but what other proposals would you have to sort of limit this sort of indoctrinative model and just try to open it up to being a more open model of
Yeah.
education?
I think education has so much potential to be more than what it is. I feel like it's really stagnant. And I'm not saying that as a slight to educational professionals. It's just that, the model we have today is a one size hat fits all approach, which is the same approach that Washington, D.C. takes to most issues, which is we're going to have kids in a building for 8 hours a day, and maybe for one of those hours they're in recess or they're in physical education, but the rest of the time they're going to be sitting down and they have to be quiet and they need to listen to the teacher teach. And some students are going to thrive in that, right? But there are other kids that
Yeah, like
they
my son is very active, and so I think that he's about to start public school, so uh, I think that it's not going to be really great for him to be in that kind of setting. It is going to help him, obviously, it does help them learn some sort of formality to be
yeah,
able to sit and be able to think and do things. But I do think that he's going to be someone who's going to be more active, wanting to get in stuff and wanting to do stuff.
yeah.
So if they could find some way to incorporate that, I definitely think that would be more beneficial.
I need to do the research a little bit more. There's one of the Scandinavian countries in which, like, they try to tailor the teaching to the learning style of the child. And if that child needs to run for 2.5 hours to burn all that energy out so they can kind of sit and focus for the rest of the day, they let them do that. And so I feel like the system we have today is very rigid. And what I'd like to see again is some innovation, and that can take a lot of different forms. It could be having the public schools adopt a more a less rigid approach, right? And you're going to have some kids when they're older. Myself, when I was a senior, I think they I think I got enrolled in calculus, right? And I tried my best and just wasn't clicking. So I ended up getting transferred out of calculus and moved to like algebra 3 or something like that. But I think there should be some standards, and I think those standards need to be in reading, writing, arithmetic, And probably my suggestion is, in terms of civics and or history, that high school seniors need to be able to pass the same test that we give to people who legally immigrate to the country. Because to my understanding, that test is actually tougher for immigrants than whatever a senior in high school today might learn through the standard curriculum. But like outside of that, I think there's things like financial literacy that could be taught
Yeah.
again at those higher ages. How does insurance work? How do I manage my monthly budget and stuff like that? I just think we unprepare people, and then I
Well,
guess
I think that's why you come out. So many people come out unprepared, and they make poor financial decisions nowadays because they never had the access to. Unless you have a parent who's actually doing that, the role of that, then they don't have access to knowing about, like, hey, maybe I should invest my money, a portion of my money. Maybe I should balance, my own budget, kind of like
yeah,
the federal government should. Uh, those are kind of things that general students should know when they come out of the high school level.
yeah. So I just think, again, I would be open to having the existing public schools kind of adopt some of those reforms. I guess my concern is whether or not it's feasible because they seem very resistant to change. And so, I am in favor of
Well,
giving more.
that's kind of the teacher unions. Like the teachers unions, they're a big proponent of trying to keep things more rigid and keep them formal in
Yeah,
that way.
I think, I think parents and students would win if they had more choices, and I think this is where some of that innovation comes up. And so, I think if the money followed the student instead of the system, I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, in a libertarian world, I would prefer that the money never leave the parents' hands to begin with, because I don't like the idea of sending the money to the government and the government cutting me a check back. I should just keep on to it in the beginning. But can you imagine? If I think you mentioned you have two kids. I have two kids. If one of those kids is all about STEM, they just love science, they love math, they love technology. There could be a little small STEM startup in the community, and they have fantastic teachers who really know their stuff. And maybe my child would do better learning about things they're interested in than going to just the all purpose typical public school that we have now. Maybe I have another kid who's just bouncing off the walls with energy, and there's a program where you know they do physical education for an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning. Then they sit them down, teach them for 2 hours, then they eat lunch. Maybe after lunch, again, they do a less rigorous activity, but it's outside. They're walking around, they're burning energy. I recall my youth in public school, and so certainly I had some teachers that were excellent, and I had some others that weren't as excellent. I remember watching a lot of VHS tapes at some point. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, we're watching Aladdin. That's weird. This really doesn't enhance my education at all. This is just because maybe there's no
They needed to fill the time.
there's
It's kind of like they have to have some sort of filler content to be able
yeah,
to allot that time.
yeah. And so again, I just feel like anything that would help loosen the rigidity, how rigid education is, I think
Mhm.
would be the benefit of all students, because some students are visual and they want to sit there and they want to look. Um, uh, you know, Me, I'm a very audio, right? So like I'll buy a book and I'll start reading it, and at some point I'll go, you know what? I'll just get the audiobook. And I get the audiobook because I just prefer to be walking around my neighborhood or at the gym listening to my book or podcast versus reading. That's my preference. And so
Yeah, see, I'm just the opposite. I prefer the tactile because I retain more of it when I actually sit down and am able to open the book and actually
yeah.
read it, because then I have that comprehension and that tactile experience
I
of reading.
I think it's one of the greatest mistakes of society is assuming that all humans um,
Function in this
function
same
the same
manner.
capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all have our strengths and weaknesses. You know, you have those people who can calculate things in their head. I have to take up my calculator and or get a pen and pencil and paper and pencil and add things together. But that just what I think contributes to the uniqueness of our country is people are great at different things. They're passionate about different things, and I just I feel like sometimes the education system we have, maybe not for everyone, but for some, it snuffs out their passion for learning, you know?
Yeah, and that's sort of what happened. That was my experience because I would say I was pretty gifted as in as far as the general public education system because I'm finishing. I'm reading it at like a third grade level in like kindergarten, and then I'm reading at like a quote unquote 12th grade level in like sixth grade. So after that, my passion for reading dips off. And I've occasionally I've got a bookshelf. I've occasionally gotten back into reading whenever I can now, and I do still somewhat enjoy reading. It's just that being sort of funneled into that, you have to read all this stuff in that way, and not reading about stuff that I'm interested in. Just kind of killed that passion for me in reading in that way, and just in general going through the high school, I didn't really gain anything at that point. I mean, I did the general education stuff, but it didn't progress me to the goals that I wanted to do. And until I got to college, then I had to figure out what I was actually interested in, which was computers. So
Yeah. Maybe I'll end with this thought. And if you have more education related questions, I'm happy to answer them. There was a really fascinating documentary I watched. It was talking about how countries all over the world handle education. And if I'm recalling correctly, in South Korea, what they do is like the very best teachers in the country. All right. So imagine you're a math teacher and you teach, high school math. They pay this teacher tons of money. And that teacher teaches like almost the entire country, right? So it's like, why do you have to learn from just whoever, geographically happens to be the math teacher in your area? And what they do is, so, let's say there's like four different super good high school math teachers. You choose which one you want to learn from, and they're giving you like the core lessons. And then the people in the classroom are more like, teachers' assistants, and they can answer questions and help you through the material. But, I guess where I'm going with that is, if you have these fantastic communicators that are just so gifted in being able to take the course material and distill it in a way that's fun and engaging for students to learn. Shouldn't we give parents and students the option to say, I want that person to teach my kid chemistry, versus just, again, no knock to chemistry teachers, but some of them are going to be great and some of them are going to be so, and every parent wants the best for their kids. So why not
and
see
and,
if we,
and I think sort of what you're describing could be a modular format of learning because there were a lot of things that I went through. Did I really need that? I mean, some of it may have been useful. I mean, doing uh, learning general home ec and stuff like that might be somewhat useful because I do like to be able to cook my own food and not have it, not throw up because it's a completely inedible. But there are these other things that I could have actually dove into, like I said, my passion kind of.
yeah. Yeah, I think that comes out too, right? If you're a teacher. So let's say you're a science teacher and you're super into biology. Maybe you teach biology for part of the year, but the other parts of the year you're having to cover other parts of science. And so I guess what I'm saying is if we could find a way to get people who are super talented and passionate about their, core thing, why couldn't why couldn't we open it up and say, okay, here are, the top 10 most passionate people about biology in the country. And, no matter where you are geographically on the map, you can take that person's lessons, and you still have the ability to get in-room classroom support from someone who is a trained person in that area. But, you know, I think there's so much innovation that is just waiting to happen. And I do know that there are other states, that are, further ahead. I think Arizona just passed something to become like the first state that
School
actually,
choice. Yeah,
yeah.
they actually they're the first state in the country to actually fully enact school choice.
So, and I think I think the way the country is set up is beautiful in a way that there can be, 50 different experiments going on. So, in 5 or 10 years, if we can tell through measurable data that Arizona did really well or very poor based on that decision, that can help influence the other states who again should be trying to produce the best outcome for their citizens.
Yeah. So, other than education, I wanted to talk a little bit. Well, one more thing on education. So, would you oppose sort of ideologies like gender theory and CRT being taught in public schools?
Yeah, I don't think that that course material is appropriate for children. Now, um, there are some people who might decide to go to a 4-year college and they teach classes and that stuff, and you're not forced to take it. You can voluntarily sign up. Then, you know, you're free to study as you choose. I do feel like, those particular, uh, critical race theory and things like that, they really have no place in the school system. Um, I feel like, as a libertarian, a lot of the ideas in there are kind of, you know, fundamentally opposed to what I believe. And so, I think I read recently that, like the human mind doesn't really stop developing until 25, I think I read. And I feel like these very advanced, um, excuse me, kind of political ideologies really have no room in the public education school system. When people go to college, they want to take whatever type of studies, you know, best of luck.
Voluntarily, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, being able to be elective, and I think this could be paired kind of like what we were talking about. If you remodeled the public education system,
Yeah.
then you can
And,
kind of remodel what they elect into.
and I'll say this, it's really crazy, um, I guess, as you age, all the young people are going to say, oh, that's just an old person complaining. I'm not really complaining. I'm just making an observation that, when I was a kid, my teachers never talked about any of this kind of stuff, and now, people are recording themselves and blasting it on TikTok and all these other social media platforms that they're so excited that they're, introducing ideas to kids. Um, I'm very accepting of other people. As a libertarian, I believe I know what's best for me. I don't necessarily know what's best for you, but you know, let's let kids be kids and not have to think about sexuality and stuff like that until they're much older. And a lot of the things that will show up in a social media feed, of people trying to expose what's going on, it doesn't sit well with a lot of parents because, you're thinking you're sending your kids to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, about your history and your science, and, um, you're not supposed to be trying to have very confusing ideas introduced to young minds who I think would have trouble understanding
Impressionable
it
young
all.
minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the, I don't think that in our district that it would really be a problem, but I do think that in general it's becoming more of a problem because there are these accounts that are showcasing more and more accounts of it happening, even
Yeah.
in areas that you don't think would be accepting to that kind of stuff. So I think it's something that, that definitely a lot of people are concerned that if your kid is, if the teacher all of a sudden decides, hey, I'm going to tell all my kids, if your kid comes home and says, hey, I'm trans, and they don't even know what that means, they don't know the implications of what they're saying, in those kind of things, it's very damaging to their mind, and it would be something that every parent's nightmare, that all of a sudden they don't have any, like, their child is being indoctrinated. I mean, obviously, public education is some level indoctrination, but this is specific ideologies targeting young kids, and trying to manipulate them in that way.
Yeah. I think there is kind of this thought or movement, and it goes through a lot of different channels, but the idea is, want to break up the nuclear family. And, you know, I believe that, after the individual, the family is, such a core part of the American fabric. And I have no problem with, you know, uh, two women want to get married and they have kids through whatever means, adoption or what have you, or two men want to get married. Um, I want,
Consenting adults, like,
I,
obviously consenting adults can do, should be able to do as they wish, but these ideologies and
yeah,
things, people telling kids that they're trans, or that they're gender non-binary, and all this kind of stuff
yeah.
that we never heard of before.
I
It's
want
it's
people to live their best life and reach their truest potential. And you know, uh, I don't feel like anyone has the right to introduce these type of ideas to such, like you said, young impressionable minds that don't really know. You know, they're not ready to grasp with those. And to be honest with you, um, again, can we just let the kids be kids for a little bit? Let them enjoy that time where they don't have to think about, when are all the bills due and having to go to work. Let them enjoy, the company of their family and their friends and growing up. And um, there's plenty of time down the road to, you know, listen to interesting ideas and that challenge what you believe, and think about it and grapple with it. Watch debates, that sort of thing. Let's leave that out of the educational system.
agreed. So, I want to bang through probably these foreign policy questions. Probably be able to get through them pretty quick. So, I presume as a libertarian that you're anti-war, anti-intervention in other countries. But would you consider yourself isolationist in that way, or do you still support some level of foreign intervention?
Yeah, I feel like, to me, when I hear the word isolationist, um, I take that as a like a derogatory term. And the reason I do it is because that's how
You were
they
told
used it.
that.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
they
how they
told
used it
you.
against Dr. Paul,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so what I would say is this: you are correct. I am anti-war. Now, I do believe in the right to self-defense. So, if America is attacked, I do believe that we have the ability to follow the process, which is to declare war per the Constitution. And I believe that we owe it to the
Through
people
Congress, not through
through,
executive order.
yes, through
Yeah.
Congress. Um, And we owe it to the soldiers and the service people to give them clear objectives, victory conditions, and an idea of when they're going to be able to come home. Knowing that things can change, I fully understand that. But I think, if anything, you know, the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan, being there for decades and losing so many lives of Americans, but as well as the local population there, innocents. I just,
And then botching the actual retreat out of Afghanistan, and leaving billions of dollars of military equipment over there.
yes, yeah, less so, yeah. So, you know, I believe that serious people, serious adults can get in a room and then come up with some sort of negotiated settlement. Now, does that mean that, both sides are going to get everything they want? Probably not. But I feel like you really got to exhaust every amount of diplomacy that you can. And that's what has me so shocked about what's going on over in Ukraine is there has been, to my knowledge, no serious person in the Biden administration to say, Russia, come meet us in Switzerland or come meet us in this country and we want to talk things out. I haven't heard any of that. So, to me, what that means that they didn't even try diplomacy. They just went to straight, funneling money and weapons to the Ukrainian government and essentially fighting a proxy war with Russia. Now,
Yeah.
you know, so
Well, it's because they're not part of NATO, which I don't support the. And I guess this is a question for you: Do you support NATO, or do you think that we should pull out of NATO?
yeah, I would agree with Thomas Jefferson, and I don't know if I'm going to have the quote, um, but the end of the quote was entangling alliances with none. So,
Mhm.
in theory, I do not believe we should be in NATO. Now, having said that, we're in it right now. If I couldn't help us get out of NATO, I would say, the other members of NATO need to be carrying their weight. I think Trump was
America,
trying.
yeah,
Trump,
Trump was trying to make sure that they paid their fair share, because he said
yeah,
that we're paying the most into NATO.
yeah.
And I think he was. Did he pull out of NATO, or I can't remember if he pulled out or if he said that he was going to pull out. I can't
I
quite
think
remember.
he kind of threatened it, but we're definitely still in NATO.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea is that me as an American taxpayer, I have to subsidize the defense of Germany. They have a first-rate economy. Why can't their citizens fund their own defense? It just didn't make any sense to me. Now, look, with the situation in Russia specifically, um, I think a couple of things. One is if I was in Congress, I would definitely be the loudest voice pushing for some sort of meeting with representatives of the Russian government to try to come up with a settled solution to avoid the needless loss of life of Ukrainian citizens. Um, Having said that, independent of what's going on in Ukraine, I think historically, if you look, I mean, I don't think I think it was shocking that Putin invaded, but it certainly wasn't unpredictable in the sense that NATO has kept expanding eastward.
Yeah.
So, I feel like this
Well,
is
he
them.
basically was threatened into a position of having to respond at some point.
Yeah.
And,
So,
and he found the perfect point to respond when NATO was weakest after,
yeah,
pandemic and everything.
I'm not a big fan of governments in general as a libertarian, so I'm certainly not a fan of the Russian government. I'm not a fan of Vladimir Putin, but I'll say this. Um, Again, I believe that the CCP is the number one competitor on the world stage with the United States of America. And I don't understand, other than my instincts would tell me that the foreign policy establishment in Washington, D.C., in conjunction with the intelligence apparatus, have a deep-seated, desire to try to revive the Cold War. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, why are Russia and us at odds with one another? It doesn't it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense that again, I understand he does terrible things to dissidents in his country. I'm not a fan of that. So I'm not heaping praise on him or their government at all. I'm just saying, if we think about it, what is the strategic advantage of being at odds with Russia, who have nuclear weapons, who also happen to border what I believe is the number one competitor to America in the CCP in China? Why would we want to push them into their arms? Why wouldn't
Well,
we
and you
try?
saw that they're sending oil over to China, and apparently we're sending oil over to China too, even though we have high gas
Yes,
prices. So
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, I think in summary, I want to produce and maintain warm relations with all nations that are interested in reciprocating. So, to me, that means trade, investment, tourism, and cultural exchange.
mhm.
I want dialogue with folks all over the world. What I don't want is policemen of the world. So, if I know now Sudan, I think, is now two separate countries. I think Sudan and South Sudan. But if a country goes into civil war, I think we should advocate for peace, advocate for talks, try to help in that sense. I don't want to pick sides. I don't want to send tax dollars over there. I don't want to send American soldiers over there. I don't want to be the policeman of the world. I don't want a nation build.
Well, I guess
I
that,
don't.
that answers the other question that I was going to have is sending. Do you believe in sending foreign aid? Kind of like how we're doing, sending billions and billions to
You know,
Ukraine now.
you know,
So
I think it's Ron Paul has a really good quote on this, which is, foreign aid is taking poor people's money in a wealthy country and giving it to
even
wealthy
to the rich
people
people in a
in a
poor
poor
country.
country.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I remember that
so
specifically.
I, you know, again, I'd like to think I'm philanthropic in nature,
Mhm.
and I want to help people. Um, I just don't think the system we have makes sense. And I think there's actually some really promising data in terms of, I'm not going to be able to pull it off the top of my head, but there was some philanthropic effort which, instead of you giving money to the organization and the organization giving it to people in Africa who needed money, it was like the organization was set up just to help you give money directly to the person, and there were no strings attached. So it's like, hey, this person in America is sending you, this villager in Africa, money. You use it how you see fit. And again,
Almost like a GoFundMe model, I guess, but more direct in that way.
yeah, I believe in a voluntary society, and I feel like that can even be translated a little bit here at home, which is, I feel like the lamest thing anyone can throw at a libertarian is, well, I guess you don't like driving on the roads, huh?
Roads, yeah.
I feel like that's so lame. And the truth is, I don't like driving on the roads because they're not very well kept up. So if I got to keep more of my own money, what would be stopping us in the age of technology to have people be able to pull together, excuse me, pull together the most important community projects and saying, look, the road stretch between here and here is awful. There's potholes, nothing's being done about it. And, we're looking for companies that will give us a quote. I mean, you put that out there, someone is going to say, hey, well, I'll do it for X, I'll do it for Y, I'll do it for Z. And then again, if the money stays with the people, there are going to be people and businesses in that community that say, yeah, we need to fix that road. So overall, I believe in a voluntary society. But back to no policeman of the world, no nation building. We talked about foreign aid, and the last thing is, I think really what I learned the most from Dr. Paul, what really, removed the cobwebs from my eyes was the fact that I do not think we should be plotting and executing coups on unfriendly governments all over the world. You kind of
which many people have speculated was kind of the methodology for Ukraine and America's intervention in Ukraine is
right,
they plotted a coup, and then
and we
that's why now that he's actually wanting to respond
yeah,
with a force of show of force.
yeah, we look at the most hostile nations on earth to us, and many of them, like Iran, is because we did a coup in that country. And at some point, that pendulum swings back the other way against us. And so,
Or it does rapidly, like I believe Iraq. We install democracy and a president over there, and then basically collapses and devolves very quickly.
yeah. And then I will end with this. I mean, freaking John Bolton the other day on being interviewed, made a comment about January 6th. He said, that wasn't a cute coup. I know
I
coups.
know how to,
I've planned
yeah,
them. It's like, and there was no instinctual like, whoa, what do you mean? Tell us about that. It's like this thing that's like, it's just swept under the rug. And again, I want other nations' governments to be friendly to ours. Um, I just don't think we should be meddling in other people's affairs, because the truth of the matter is, if people were meddling in our affairs, we'd be pretty upset.
yeah. And I guess speaking of people meddling in affairs, is relating to sort of the foreign policy. I don't know if you saw this article, but there were 6.1 billion of real estate in America is owned by the CCP. So do you think that you would support banning Chinese entities from buying up this American land, or do you see that sort of as like the free market? Do you see that as an intervention on their behalf, and do you think you would you would vote to ban them as a sort of protectionist vote to keep them out of buying American land?
Yes. So the way I would answer that is, the question I would ask is, does the American government have the ability to buy land over in China? And the answer is, to the best of my knowledge, no. So,
Because that's all controlled by the CCP, and you have to get specific approval through the CCP to be able to operate,
yes.
even operate legally as a business over there. You have to pledge allegiance to the CCP and
So,
follow their guidelines.
so in general, in a world where the CCP has fallen and the Chinese people are freer than they are today, and they have some sort of constitutional republic or some sort of form of government that isn't what they have today, would I have a problem with a Chinese national buying land in the United States? No, unless they do not grant the same privileges to us over there. So with the CCP, again, they are our largest competitor on the world stage, in my opinion. All my focus and attention would be on them, not on Russia. Is I do not believe, I could be wrong, I haven't looked that deeply into it. I don't believe that they would allow US government to buy land over in China. Therefore, if it's not reciprocal, I do not believe we should be allowing the Chinese government to purchase land in the United States, especially the article I read recently, which might be the one you're referring to, whereas I think they bought land very close to a military installation that we have. I think maybe out in the Dakotas, if I'm remembering correctly, but it had something to do with like one of our bases where our drones could depart from. and they bought land just like, not too far away from wherever that installation is. And so uh, um, I would not be in favor of that. The idea as you posed it as a libertarian, I certainly that registers with me, but
Mhm.
if it's not reciprocal, it's not a free market. And
Mhm.
so um, I would not be in favor of letting them buy land in our country as the CCP is constituted today.
Yeah, and the just the reason for the framing there is just because there are some people who will say, oh yeah, like whatever is allowable, permissible, it's free market kind of things. Some people are more permissible about those kind of things or than others. So that's just why I framed it in that way. Um, so I guess I can give you an easy one before I get into a couple of probably like the last really
Okay.
major questions. But I was looking, as someone 28 years old trying to get involved, um, be politically active. I was looking at possibly getting involved as a candidate for a more local office. So, what's the biggest hurdle that you've sort of found in your campaigning?
Yeah, I'm a first time candidate. And I think I'd be the first to tell you that if things weren't going off the rails so much as a country, I'd be very content just to stay at home with my family and enjoy, their company and the company of my friends. I do feel called though, in a sense, because I do feel like things are, I think the phrase I used the other night was, I don't think that American citizens should be content to witness the managed decline of their country. So, as a first time candidate, it is a little bit daunting. I think my biggest fear is like not really understanding um like all the little nuances. And what I mean by that is, I mean, anytime you're dealing with the government, it's not easy, so
Mhm.
sure, there are websites with like a ton of things that you can read, and a ton of links that you have to go through to make sure. And so, for an
Yeah, like
example,
Mises.org, if you follow Mises, um, and the good people over there. I think Mises is a great resource for a lot of people.
yeah, yeah, well, I meant like, like the Secretary of State's website in terms of
Oh
like,
yeah, for finding actual information about.
yeah,
Yeah, I did find that it was kind of difficult to find specifically, my county, my district, and all this stuff of
yeah.
like when these exact or the cycle of the elections and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
It
so
should be much simpler.
let me give you an example, okay? I live in Tuscaloosa. We go visit my in-laws up in Florence, Alabama, quite often. So we drive, that north to south on 43 up.
Mhm.
And the second to last time we went up, I saw political signs everywhere up and down that drive. And I thought to myself, oh, well, now that I'm a candidate, I need to print up some signs and I will put mine out along the path so that when people drive by, they'll see my name and my logo and it'll raise the brand awareness and whatnot. And this most recent time, my wife and I actually took separate cars because she brought the kids up in her car and I brought the signs up in my car, and I was going to be making multiple stops. Well, when I drove up, almost all the signs were gone. And so I'm thinking, well, if I put these signs out, are they going to like, is like the state going to clear them out, And so trying to figure out like when is the, appropriate time to put them out or not put them out, because I didn't want to spend that money on them only to see them disappear. And so I start reading through all the rules and stuff. And like, the way I understand it is you can only put them out so many days in front of an election. But having said that, there are still some signs out. So are those campaigns now not in compliance? Are they going to get a fine? As a first time candidate, everything we're doing is bare bones and volunteer driven. And so like, if my campaign gets a fine, I don't know how I'm going to pay it, So I'm trying to do everything by the books. It's not made very clear on how to do that. And so I am thankful that the Libertarian Party of Alabama has a great, network of folks that I'll ask questions and people will provide answers or websites to refer me to. And so it does help kind of make the daunting challenge of trying to do it all by yourself to know that you have support out there. And then there are two folks who are kind of officially on my team who are volunteers, one as a campaign manager, one as a treasurer. And so um, it does help to have people work alongside you and to be able to kick ideas around. And um, that would be my one main piece of advice is it can get sort of overwhelming, but if you have some sort of support, whether that's through a political party or through some folks who are going to get on board with your team, that certainly helps.
Awesome. And then these may be a little bit more difficult for your answer. So, and this is sort of goes back to my initial comment that I made. So, if you know about the Free State Project up in New Hampshire and how they're trying to strategize to essentially either make the Republicans there more libertarian or actually winning with libertarian candidates. What do you think your strategy went in choosing to go like sort of against the duopoly when you could have possibly when you could be able to swing some of these Republican voters and there's likely less Democrat voters at least in our district, but why not try to swing these people into a more libertarian direction?
Well, the way I would answer that question would be um, I am trying to win over Republican voters. Um, so are you talking about Republican voters or are you talking about Republican politicians?
Well, I would say mostly Republican voters, like because some of your structure, some of your campaign points, I guess, would be against uh, traditional like Republican types, and I wonder why you chose the issues that you did to just kind of be outside instead of trying to work within the framework and just because I think that and I don't know the strategy necessarily that you're trying to employ,
Yeah.
but saying you're against both of these, and if people like generally are more in line with Republicans in the district, I do think the Republican voters are going to be averse to that to kind of telling them that they're bad in this way for these kind of structure.
Yeah.
Maybe I worded that wrong, but trying to say
Well,
like, hey, I'm against the duopoly, and just saying, hey, I don't like neither of these, and you can have that belief, but I think that saying just strictly saying, hey, both are bad, and this is the only way instead of promoting libertarian ideas without attacking the parties. I guess that's more of the structure.
yeah. Yeah. No, I follow you. The a question I've been asked on interviews, with different folks, is something to the effect of, "Hey, you can't really win. You're just trying to pull Adderholt more libertarian." And my answer to that is, I am my goal is to win the race. It's not to pull Adderholt more libertarian. Now, maybe that happens as a byproduct of what I'm trying to do. Um, I am not necessarily trying. I'm trying to talk, and I think I'm having some success with the folks I've talked to. I'm not putting the blame for the situation on Democratic and Republican voters. I'm trying to empathize with them that, in my personal situation, I would consider myself a very small, limited government, constitutional, fiscal responsibility, balanced budget kind of voter.
Hmm.
And I was in the GOP for quite a while. And the more I got involved, the more I saw that they simply pay lip service to those things that um, the Republican Party, the establishment in DC, they're always on defense. They never go on offense. They don't even pause spending, or the great Ronald Reagan simply reduced the growth of government, and
Mhm.
that's kind of hailed as like a win. And so
Well, he did pause. I believe he did pause spending for a couple of years, and then basically ratcheted up the spending like 10 times more.
yeah,
After
so
that. But
I
so.
think where I've had success, and again, you know, it's still very early in the campaign, and if I'm being honest with you, there's still a lot of voters that don't even know I'm on the ballot. Unfortunately, I think only three different news organizations ran my press release about my campaign, but yeah, I didn't really know what to expect. I guess I shouldn't expect. Um,
I definitely wouldn't expect it from like AL.com because they're probably the worst organization or news organization that I've seen. So
yeah, I
don't
don't know.
expect.
Yeah, I don't know. Mine was two local community newspapers,
Mhm.
and then patch.com, which to be honest with you, I'd never even heard of before they ran it. So very thankful to them. But I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to talk to Democrat voters, and this is my pitch to them, which is I'm probably not going to agree with you on a lot, but there's some things that I would agree with you on. Um, the truth is, the district happens to be one of the reddest districts in one of the reddest states in the union. And you're running the same candidate you ran in 2020, and that
Mhm.
person lost 82 to 18%. I do not know if I've seen a more lopsided congressional race than that, because I kind of follow politics, mainly because I want to make sure I know what all um, the the schemers are up to.
Mhm.
And so if you see someone who wins 60 to 40, you go, "Oh wow, that person won pretty big." 60 to 40 is big. I don't know what 82 to 18 is. But the truth is, if you're a Democrat voter, in Russellville or in Gadsden or Coleman or Jasper, the truth is this person that is your party's nominee is unfortunately not going to win. He's just not. So, what I can promise you is I feel like I'm very reasonable. Again, I'm trying to be the most accessible candidate. I'm willing to talk to folks. I feel like I'm a good listener. And if your goal is to unseat the Republican, I'm actually your best shot, because I can have pull from both. And so I've had a couple conversations with folks who are independents, who I thought were kind of unicorns in a sense. I didn't think they really existed, but I have talked to one or two independents and basically gave them the pitch about, look, DC is a hot mess. And again, the Democrat is unfortunately not in a position to pose a serious challenge to the incumbent of 25 years, which a lot of people would agree with term limits that,
I think that more of my question
okay.
comes from this sort of framing is, let's say if I look at Adderholt's voting record, and I know I did peruse through his voting record, and I found a lot of things that I would say are not conservative about his voting record. So, or not even not even fiscally conservative in that way in a lot of manners.
Yeah.
So why not? I guess the question is, why not try to win that Republican base by saying I'm the actual real fiscally conservative candidate in the race
No,
that I want to be.
I think I am. I mean, when I have a meme that I posted, right?
Mhm.
That got a lot of traction on Facebook. It has I think, and again, for someone who's starting out, this is probably sounds like small numbers, but for me it's the best one I've had, right? So, over 300 different reactions, and basically saying, look, um The national debt when Adderholt went to Congress was $5 trillion. It's 30 trillion now. So it has 6x'd in 25 years. And so what I'm saying to Republicans is, if you look at his record, there are some conservative things in there, right? Maybe on the culture of like promoting a culture of life. Okay. But if you look at the fiscal responsibility side, regularly votes to increase spending, regularly votes to increase the debt ceiling, has voted against pitiful attempts to reduce spending, such as Rand Paul's penny plan, where he just said, look, we're going to cut 1% across the board. I mean, 1% is nothing. Every single entity in government could get by with 1% less. And he voted against it. So,
Well, I actually think it was. Are you referring to the balanced budget one, or I don't know if there was a different one, but there was one that I don't know if it's actually gotten to the point where they voted on the floor yet, but
okay.
where he was actually going to do a balanced budget, to where essentially for every 8 cent, I believe it was, the idea was for 8 cents of spending that they would have to cut, so many dollars out of it. So essentially, it was trying to get it cut the budgets to make sure that they would shrink down to actual
Yeah.
legitimate, like
And
feasible size.
if
So.
I'm being honest with you, I'm still going through his record, right? So I just
Mhm,
found the other day he supported Obama's cash for clunkers. He
mhm,
certainly has supported sending our troops and our money overseas time and time again. And so I am going to Republican voters and saying, if you believe in limited small government, fiscal responsibility, and balanced budgets, this individual certainly isn't contributing to those goals. And then I usually follow it up with this, which is AOC and MTG have only been in Congress for a couple of years, and yet they're kind of universally known across the country. And my
mhm.
question is, if you've been there for 25 years, like, why don't the people in Alabama and the people across the country know you as the person that's been railing against the reckless spending, right? I feel like a lot of these politicians are very vanilla, very milk toast, kind of just bobbleheads, and they kind of take the most, I'm not gonna say anything that'll get me in trouble, vote for me, and then they go to DC, they buy property in DC, so they become like a part of that community as opposed to being a part of the community back here. And then, you know, they're just told by leadership, this is how you're voting, you know. And so to me, that's my message to Republicans is uh, this is the reddest district in one of the reddest states in the country. And you're probably going to get what you want if you were to read the tea leaves. Now, I would say to any Republican, give a hard look to your libertarian candidate, reach out to them just like you did to me. They'll probably, talk with you, answer your questions. So certainly I'd like to see more libertarians elected. But having said
Mhm.
that, if you're reading the tea leaves federally, Republicans most likely will sweep the midterms. Okay. So in this race, the people in District 4 have a very unique opportunity. If they want to give a black eye, figuratively, to McConnell and McCarthy, they need to send a message that we're not going to support Republicans that go to DC and contribute to the fiscal insolvency of our country.
Mhm.
And to those I've had a conversation with, that resonates. The other thing that I find very amusing, and granted, I haven't done a lot of it, is I am trying to knock on some doors. So here locally in Tuscaloosa, if I knock on a door and I ask someone, how do you typically vote? If they say Republican, I say, oh, well, you probably know the name of your congressperson who's now the longest serving member of the Alabama delegation. I haven't had one person say Adderholt's name. Okay.
Mhm.
So to me,
Well, and I only know him because I did reach out to him. Like I said, regarding some of a couple of the different bills. I've been trying to sort of, not I haven't gotten directly politically active, but I
yeah,
did reach out to him to try to say, hey, vote against the big spending bills, vote against the um, vote, try to support the removal of this rendering plant.
Yeah.
Just
So
throwing weight behind these kind of things and
so
trying to get donors.
you're like me in the sense that we're probably a little bit more engaged than the average citizen,
Mhm.
right? So like the average citizen, they just know like they vote Republican when it's time to go to the polls in November, but they're not, keeping a watchful eye on actually what's going up there. They just kind of whatever the narrative that the mainstream corporate media puts out there, just kind of gets absorbed that way. And so, I'm very optimistic about my chances. It's all about how many people I can get a hold of. Is that door knocking? Is that phone calls? Is that videos like this? Now this is a long one, so you're gonna have to have some
Yeah.
dedicated people. I might have to go through and like put some timestamps and maybe help people jump to whatever they're interested in. But I'm recording a series of short videos that might be between 1 to 5 minutes long on a specific topic. I'm going to a lot of community events. So we talked about the world's longest yard sale. I'm going to be at the Watermelon Festival in Russellville in mid-August. I'm going to the Foothills Festival in Jasper. So I'm going to have a table out there, and again, trying to go to people where they are. And I think that if people take the opportunity to do some thinking other than I'm just going to vote for the red team or the blue team, if they take a look at the three candidates, I feel like if I can raise that awareness that I actually stand a good chance, because I feel like a lot of Republicans would agree with a lot of the things that you and I have been talking about tonight.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was just sort of trying to get is because I think that we would agree almost on everything economically, but it was just the idea that, like, oh well, we're just going to say against the duopoly, or neither left nor right, and I think it triggered. I guess if you followed the 2020 campaign, it sort of reminded me of Joe Jorgensen, and
Mm,
why that I didn't vote for Joe Jorgensen, because she tried to say run so down the middle. And I guess to me, I don't know if you've ever watched NASCAR. Used to be a huge NASCAR fan, and one of my favorite drivers, Jeff Gordon, he would like to try to run down the middle. And if you on these big tracks, a lot of times the middle lane is the absolute worst lane, and so he would go all the way to the back of the pack. And so that's what I was saying is like, why not just try to say, hey, like Republican voters, this is the actual opportunity to vote somebody who's more really in line with your views, as opposed to trying to say like, hey, I want to get, I guess. I mean, I realize that this is a race where you have to do have to go under support potentially from people who would vote for the other side. But what I'm saying is if this is a red district, why not say, hey, this is an opportunity to vote for somebody who actually will enact some of your the ideas that you guys want.
yeah. I definitely know maybe at the national level, maybe the Libertarian Party would use some of that phrasing a lot more, against the duopoly and things like that. I don't know if I'm personally using that as much as maybe they would. I my opinion is me personally. Um, I'm fighting for every vote. All right, I am not going to try to play to one side or the other. I'm not trying to water down my message. I think if people, again, if they evaluate the options and they say, okay, um, we have an incumbent of 25 years. A, I believe in term limits. That's too long. B, um, has always voted to increase spending and increase the debt ceiling and, all these foreign excursions and whatnot. Um, do I want to send that person back to Washington to where they haven't been an outspoken, loud voice against the things I'm really passionate about? Or do I want to potentially send a message to the Republican Party that my vote as a limited government, constitutional government, fiscal responsibility voter should not be taken for granted. And if you don't give me candidates in my own party that align with my values, I'm going to vote for someone that is. And, so I am trying to personally push that message, and I am pleased with the interactions I've had so far.
Well, I think that covers all the major bases that I wanted to really hit on, I guess. So I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Is there
Well, look,
anything else you want to?
this is
So sorry I took so much of your time.
no, it's fine. My kids are asleep, and my I think I mentioned my wife's out of town for a couple of days, so I probably would have been listening to a podcast or learning or something myself. So I really do appreciate it. If you do have additional questions, you can always email me, and I do know that I'm in the process of recording again a series of videos on both YouTube and Twitch that are issue specific. So I know that there were probably some topics that you probably wanted to get to, but we have been going here for a long time. And so just to let you know, stay tuned. Those things are coming. I think I've shot maybe 30 of these videos so far, and I'm just trying to drip them out maybe one day at a time. And then,
And I definitely recommend you to look up things like right to repair and like the fair tax, just to see if that's something that you would be willing to put on your campaign.
yeah, absolutely. I guess the thing about me is I like to think I'm open minded, even when I'm talking to people that I know I'm politically opposed to. I do have plenty of friends who probably identify as left or progressive or whatnot, and they're usually pretty civil if I have conversation with them. So again, in a perfect world, I want to drive the tax burden on average working Americans as low as possible. And I'll take whatever means I can get to help that. So if I go to Congress and there's momentum behind the flat tax or the fair tax or anything, I'm certainly going to be on that team advocating for that, because um, we're just taxed too much. And then what little money we have left, there's that stealth tax called inflation. And, it's hurting everybody at the pump and at the grocery store and energy bills and just about everything else. So, Trey, I really appreciate
Well,
your time.
yeah, I appreciate you taking the time and being able to have this open discussion. It's really been
Yeah.
really helpful.
Hopefully one day we'll cross paths out there in person on the campaign trail. But certainly be on the lookout for those additional videos, and perhaps we can chat again down the road.
Sounds awesome.
All right, everybody. Good night. And again, thanks for your interest in my campaign. I want to talk to as many voters as possible. Maybe we'll look to do a virtual town hall. We can try to bring several different people up here in the future. So again, Trey, thanks so much. Good night, everybody.